New Orleans, also known as the Carefree City, metropolis on the Mississippi, synonymous with good food, jazz and Mardi Gras. In New Orleans, a page of history was created. Founded by France, conquered by Spain, bought by President Jefferson and occupied by the Yankees. New Orleans also possesses the second largest harbour in the USA, and even today they shout, "Full speed ahead," as paddle steamers negotiate Old Man River. It was the only way to transport goods to the coast, and today the showboats are used solely for pleasure, as hotels, gambling casinos, and for pleasure trips. Old European charm and the Caribbean lust for life unite with incomparable ethnic flair. And Tennessee Williams, in his famous play A Streetcar Named Desire, had his protagonist say, "Don't you also love those long, rainy afternoons in New Orleans, when an hour is not an hour, rather a piece of eternity that overcomes one to the extent that one doesn't know what to do with it?" 3,760 kilometers long, the Mississippi, and throughout the centuries, it has frequently changed its course. Each year, 7,000 foreign freighters and 100,000 inland ships travel the long brown river. The shovel-wheel steamers used to transport cotton, and today a huge variety of goods leaves here for all corners of the world. In long, wide curves, the extensive brown river wends its way through the vast country to the sea. And here begins the journey to the swamps, the Mississippi Swamps. The river dictates the daily life of its inhabitants. They live from it and with it. Thus, each year, the 3-day-long Crawfish Festival is celebrated, during which there are river crabs, competitions, and naturally also the crowning of the River Crab Queen. Clucking hens and grunting pigs are no strangers to the swamps. This farm offers a variety of animals a home until they end up on the plate. And at the daily morning feed of maize, it's plain to see that hunger is an unpleasant feeling. The swamps also offer a large quantity of authentic souvenirs. Old nets, strangely formed flotsam, nutria and racoon furs, and every kind of animal bone and skull. Armed with these souvenirs, the traveller can really surprise those who have stayed at home. And after such an adventure, the exciting story of how these rarities were obtained perhaps doesn't even have to be invented. Slowly the excursion starts to become serious. Oppressive heat sets in. Cans of petrol at the ready. Final preparations are carried out. The special boat is filled with petrol, and the journey into the mysterious realm of the swamps and lakes can begin. A houseboat quickly disappears into the distance. The boat zooms through one of the main tributaries. These flat-bottomed boats are specially suited for the journey into the swamps. With a water line of 20 centimetres, they can travel effortlessly along the wide and deep expanses of water, or through narrow, sometimes only centimetre-deep brooks. These boats are renowned for their manoeuvrability. For centuries, they lived in the seclusion of the swamps, namely the Cajuns, who enjoyed their own unique lifestyle. Today, there are about 1 million of these people of French origin. We were a hard-working and happy people. What we didn't have, we didn't miss. That is their sentiment. In contrast to the Creoles, they were simple fisher folk, farmers and trappers who, until the 1920s, lived isolated from the outside world. Today, they work mainly as oil workers, but have retained their ancient French language. The Cajuns are great entertainers. They like music and dance, and their sharply spiced cuisine is world famous. The swamps are extensive. Only experienced boatmen can find their way around the mass of main and side tributaries. And after only a short time, it's easy to lose your sense of direction. Sight of the sky is often lost through the density of the trees. Cypress swamps give way to marshy meadows. Most of the trees have swollen trunks owing to water inundation, plain to see by the rise of the water level. the past 5,000 years, the Mississippi had 7 different deltas, prior to it being reinforced by embankments. When dykes strengthened the river, some side channels remained. These are the famous bayous, small rivers. The bayous are a labyrinth of small tributaries and waterways. The subtropical climate makes the vegetation wither and forces travellers to struggle for each breath of air. When the water is moving, mosquitoes are less of a threat. In the summer months, the temperature rises to 30 degrees. Frequent and heavy rainfalls increase the high humidity, and in autumn there is the risk of hurricanes. On the journey along the main tributary, John explains that there are still those who believe that people shouldn't enter the swamps. Horror stories tell of people who have been lost in the swamps. And a Yankee woman, says John smilingly, said that she thought the swamps were okay, but rather neglected. A tranquil side tributary reveals insurmountable nature. Here the trees have grown very closely together. A jumble of branches and leaves make one aware of the impenetrableness of this place. Nature has made its own laws here, and when entering this world, it's wise to be guided by nature's rules. Without the engine, the flat-bottomed boat glides through the water. Tranquility. Suddenly there is a rustling sound. Somewhere in the thicket, an animal scurries away. Narrow and difficult channels turn this excursion into an exciting adventure. Cowens is the name of the oldest life form in the swamp. These turtles grow to about 10 to 25 centimetres long and feed mainly on small fish and water animals. The calm picture of turtles lying lazily in the sun is deceptive. Their biggest enemy is the alligator, and one of its favourite dishes is the turtle. And so the armoured lizards live a precarious existence. As clumsily as turtles move on land, they are equally graceful in water. And after a short rest on one of the tree stumps, they move off again into the cool water. Like small pointed mountains, air roots protrude from the water. They form small groups surrounded by tall old trees. In some places, they grow so close together that it's impossible to negotiate them even in a flat-bottomed boat. Glimpse of the legendary water monster of the swampland. Wookie, a cousin of the Loch Ness monster, has not yet allowed itself to be seen by anyone, but the legend lives on, and perhaps... Almost 30,000 hectares of swampland have been declared a nature reserve. The tranquil, though strange scenery is viewed from above like a network of city streets. Americans call this landscape the wetlands, in which the complex balance between salt and fresh water reigns supreme. Herons move in slow motion in order to catch their prey. Carefully, a bird traces its way through the shallow water in the search for fish. The delta area provides ideal conditions for the many feathered species, including about 4 million ducks that spend each winter here. Also, the national symbol of the USA, the white-headed sea eagle, nests here. The variety of animals living in this region is vast. Whether in water, on the ground, in the trees, or in the air, the swamp is the paradise over which they rule. For privacy, houseboats are moored discreetly so that only a second glance reveals them. Thus, they quite often unexpectedly appear from nowhere. The listless alligator reacts unpredictably and at lightning speed if unduly disturbed. It's best to play safe. And it's a good idea to exchange the normal lens for a telephoto lens. Those who go too close may pay with their lives. The alligator can grow from 50 centimetres to 2.5 metres. They eat fish, frogs, turtles and snakes and sometimes even dogs. But in the warmth of the midday sun, they are at their most relaxed. For a long time, the swamps were considered to be a no-man's land. Neither Louisiana nor Mississippi raised a claim on them. No one wanted them. And so, for a long time, the swamps were considered to be an ideal hideaway. Pirates hid their rich booty here, and smugglers set up their secret rendezvous. More movement in the undergrowth. The boat moves slowly past a hidden beaver lodge. Silently, a water snake glides out of its refuge. Seconds later, all sight of it has gone. As wonderful and innocent as these moods of nature may seem, they can often spell danger. The total isolation and remoteness of the swamps have inspired many an author to write great novels. William Faulkner, a recipient of the Nobel Prize for Literature, and also the famous playwright of the Southern States, Tennessee Williams. In their novels and plays, They colourfully describe the rise and fall of various wealthy families of the southern states. This region has also produced its own unique music culture. Slaves were allowed to sing in their native African language and to perform their dances and play their instruments. And through their grandchildren, jazz was born. The founding fathers of jazz played in the streets and in the squares, limited mainly to certain areas of the town. In the 20s, which are referred to in the United States as the Jazz Age, most of New Orleans' great musicians had already performed in Chicago and New York. Branches block the way. The boat is forced to make a detour. John switches off the engine. Silently we glide through the water. We pass by dripping trees and broken tree stumps. The region is untamed and almost impenetrable. And there's wild and uninhibited celebration. Mardi Gras, the Creole festival, is the largest open-air show in the world. Each year, 2 million spectators enjoy this traditional event, which comprises 50 parades and 90 balls. Strict rules and traditions turn the parades into complex festivities. Mardi Gras has now become so deeply entrenched in the social psyche that even spectating has become a ritual. Many famous film directors have been inspired by the swamps. Great films have been shot in these woods. Many a fictional murderer has been chased by bloodhounds through the swamps. Savage manhunts and dramatic family tragedies have been filmed on this, nature's tangled and watery stage. And the extreme humidity of this environment is a challenge for both man and machine. John explains the real-life problems with those on the other side of the law. Escaped convicts frequently seek sanctuary in the swamps. Next, the hunt for them begins, and large contingents of police arrive in boats and, assisted by the local inhabitants, search every conceivable hiding place with a high degree of success. Cypresses line the bank, their trunks bent and twisted. Spanish moss hangs from the branches. Many of these trees are 400 to 500 years old. Here, all the plants and animals live their lives according to the progression of the seasons and the continuously fluctuating water level. The Spaniards called it Spanish beard. This moss is a unique rootless plant that obtains its nourishment from the air. According to legend, it is the hair of a princess who was murdered on her wedding day. The princess's hair was hung in a tree, after which it was subsequently carried away by the wind, which scattered it over the entire country. The journey continues. In the main tributaries, the small boat moves like an arrow. And somehow, the journey is reminiscent of a scene from an action-packed James Bond film. After such a variety-rich journey, where the cool breeze is a welcome sensation, the swamp expedition enters a peaceful tributary. The stillness and isolation has a calming effect on even the hottest temperaments, and the glories of nature reveal themselves once more. The fish heron and silver heron almost became extinct. Their feathers were much prized, and alligators found the flesh of the birds particularly appealing. Today, these large colonies are protected by law. Nutrias and racoons still inhabit the swamps. Protected and carefully reared, their numbers have risen again in the last few years. They used to be sought after by hunters and trappers. Their pelts fetched good prices. Today, they are only hunted under controlled conditions and at certain times of the year. Slowly the landscape changes. Dense woods become more penetrable. Wide expanses appear. With its huge heavy clouds, the blue sky reappears. The tropical temperatures and the high humidity of these narrow channels make each movement an effort. Some side tributaries of the Bayou lead through a reed belt. The boat glides past hanging reed tubes. The wind gently whistles through the fields, and with a little imagination, one can recall the melancholy songs of the slaves. John points to the houseboats of fishermen, and those who prefer the primitive and bohemian way of life offered by the swamps. Cajun trappers used to live here in huts and survived by hunting animals for their fur. John and his family also live in the swamps. He has spent his whole life here and can't imagine ever leaving this place. John tells how he used to live alone in one of these small huts. After he married, the small dwelling became too cramped. Offspring were on the way, and so he decided to move to a large houseboat. The old craft was lovingly restored and fitted out with all the necessary comforts of life. Today, his entire family lives on the boat. Both traditional and contemporary lifestyles are to be found on the stretches of land around the Mississippi. Hot jazz rhythms, colourful festivals and culinary delicacies are the multifarious ingredients for this fascinating holiday experience, which is a melting pot of European, African and Caribbean cultures. The wonderful world of the swamps, with their legends and myths, draws the traveller under its spell. A bewitching labyrinth of infinite waterways, each one revealing a special fascination. Danger and beauty are once again reflected in the flow of water. The fascination of nature is as puzzling as the secrets of the Mississippi swamps.